My name is Ava Miller, and just a few short years ago, at 21, I genuinely believed I had it all figured out. I was an energetic student at a vibrant university, my eyes bright with the promise of the future. My greatest passion was a project I'd poured my heart into, the Tech Connect Community Hub. It was going to be a place where technology met community, offering resources, training, and a collaborative space for people from all walks of life. The $50,000 my late grandmother had lovingly bequeathed me, specifically earmarked for my education and a future business venture, felt like the golden key to unlocking this dream. It was more than just money. It was her belief in me, a tangible link to her foresight and love. I never in my wildest nightmares imagined that this foundation of hope would be systematically dismantled by the very people I trusted most, my own family. The echoes of their justifications, the sting of their choices, still haunt the quiet corners of my mind. Before I delve into the agonizing details of that betrayal, how it forced me onto a perilous path of uncovering a criminal enterprise, and ultimately how I clawed my way back to build a different, perhaps even more meaningful future, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop me a line in the comments, and please hit that like button if you've ever had your dreams dismissed or your trust shattered by those who should have been your staunchest supporters. The memory is seared into my brain. I walked into our living room, a place usually filled with warmth and laughter, one weekend home from university. But that day, the air was heavy, suffocating, with a tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. My mother, Sarah, a woman usually composed, was dabbing her eyes with a tissue, her shoulders shaking. My father, David, his face a mask of controlled anger, paced relentlessly, his jaw tight. And Ethan, my older brother, normally the life of any gathering, was slumped on the sofa, pale and looking years older than his 25 years. My cheerful hello died on my lips. Mom, Dad, Ethan. What's wrong? Is everything okay? I asked, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. Dad stopped his pacing, his shoulders slumping as if under an immense weight. He found it hard to meet my gaze. Ava, honey, sit down. There's been a little trouble. He managed, his voice strained. Mom's voice, when she spoke, was a trembling whisper. Your brother, he made a terrible mistake. A foolish, terrible mistake. Ethan winced but kept his eyes glued to the floor. I slowly sat on the edge of an armchair, the initial worry morphing into a sickening unease. What kind of mistake, Ethan? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He finally mumbled, his voice almost inaudible. I lost some money. A lot of money. Dad interjected the words, sounding forced. He got involved in a high-risk online investment scheme, and he borrowed money he couldn't repay. From some very dangerous people, Ava. We're talking about nearly $100,000. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. My head was spinning. The sum was astronomical. But the knockout punch, the one that would irrevocably alter the course of my life, was still to come. Dad took a deep breath, his eyes pleading for an understanding I couldn't yet fathom. Honey, we had no other choice. To protect Ethan, to keep him safe. We had to use the money your grandmother left you. All of it. To pay off his debts. Please understand. It was the only way. The world went silent. My face turned white as a sheet. $50,000. My $50,000. My future. My startup fund. I whispered the words, catching in my throat. Grandma's money. The money for the Tech Connect Community Hub. It was the fund that represented not just a business, but my independence, my chance to make a real difference, to honor my grandmother's belief in me. Mom reached for my hand, her touch feeling like a brand. I instinctively pulled away. You're his sister, Ava, she pleaded, her voice rising. Family helps family. He was in real danger. We can't let our son be harmed. What would people think? His life was on the line. I looked from my distraught mother to my defeated father, then to Ethan, who still couldn't meet my gaze. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound could. It wasn't just about the money, though, that was devastating enough. It was the complete and utter disregard for my dreams, my future, everything my grandmother had intended for me. They hadn't even consulted me, hadn't considered me. They never once asked how I felt. I thought a cold wave washing over me. My ambitions, my meticulously planned future, were all disposable compared to the life of their precious son. In that moment, something fragile and essential inside me shattered into a million pieces. I slowly stood up, a chilling numbness spreading through me, rendering me speechless. I turned and walked out of the room, the sound of my mother's choked sobs and my father's heavy sighs echoing behind me, a mournful soundtrack to my broken dreams. A week after that fateful night, I moved out. I couldn't bear to live under their roof, in a house that now felt like a monument to their betrayal. I found a tiny, stark studio apartment downtown. My university studies, once a source of joy and excitement, were put on indefinite hold. The Tech Connect community hub. My vibrant dream became a ghost, a painful reminder of what had been stolen. My days transformed. The university sweatshirt was exchanged for a standard-issue barista apron at The Daily Grind, a busy local coffee shop. I learned to expertly operate the espresso machine, calling out orders with a forced cheerfulness that masked the turmoil within. Nights were spent tutoring online, the extra income, barely enough to cover rent and basic necessities. I was noticeably thinner, the sparkle in my eyes dulled by exhaustion and a constant gnawing anxiety. The wound of their betrayal was still raw, a constant ache in my chest, but with it grew a fierce primal need to survive, to stand on my own 2 feet. My best friend Chloe was a lifeline during this period. Her visits to the coffee shop, her concerned eyes, her unwavering belief in me. They were small beacons of light in a very dark world. "I'm always here if you need anything," she'd say, squeezing my hand, and those simple words meant more than she could ever know. Then, one late evening in my sparsely furnished but neat studio, as I sat surrounded by borrowed library textbooks and meticulously reviewing a budget that never seemed to stretch far enough, my phone buzzed. Caller ID, Mom. I hesitated, a familiar wave of exhaustion washing over me, before answering with a sigh. "Hello." Her voice was frantic, almost hysterical. "Ava, thank God you have to help. It's Ethan again. He's gotten in deeper with those people. This Vic Costello guy, he's not kidding around. They're threatening to break his legs, Ava." My eyes closed. Not again. "Mom, I told you I don't have anything left. I'm struggling every day as it is," I said, the weariness evident in my voice. "We know about the small condo downtown that Grandma also left you." She pressed, her voice desperate. "The one she said was an investment for your future. You could sell it, Ava. Please, just this once more for your brother, he's family." My eyes snapped open. That condo. It was a small, rather run-down unit my grandmother had purchased years ago, hoping it would appreciate in value. It was my only remaining link to her foresight, my last tangible piece of security, the final thread of the safety net she had tried to weave for me. They didn't just steal my academic future. I thought, a bitter taste filling my mouth. Now they want to take away the last piece of security my grandmother tried to give me, all to enable Ethan's bottomless pit of irresponsibility. Again, a surge of anger, cold, hard, and unfamiliar, cut through my exhaustion and despair. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about my worth, my boundaries, my right to my own future. "No," I said, and the word, though quiet, was imbued with a firmness that surprised even me, a voice devoid of any earlier softness or uncertainty. "I won't sell it. He made his mess, he can deal with it. I've had enough." My mother's voice on the other end erupted into screams and reproaches, a torrent of accusations about how selfish and heartless I was, how I could abandon my own brother. I hung up my hand, trembling not from fear, but from the force of my own conviction. Tears of frustration and anger streamed down my face, but this time they were different. They weren't tears of a victim. They were tears of defiance. My eyes, though wet, shone with a new steely determination. "I've sacrificed enough," I told myself, the words a silent vow. "It's time for them to face the consequences. As for me, I need to understand why my brother keeps falling into these bottomless pits of debt. There's something not right about this Vic Costello guy or the people he's involved with." The path ahead was terrifyingly unclear, but for the first time since that devastating family meeting, I felt a flicker of agency, a sense that I could do more than just react. I could investigate. I could fight back. My decision to refuse to sell the condo marked a profound shift within me. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was now overshadowed by a burning need for answers, and perhaps a different kind of justice. My fight wasn't just about personal survival anymore. It was morphing into something far larger, far more dangerous. A few days after that final fraught call with my mother, I decided to see this Vic Costello for myself. Dressed in dark, inconspicuous clothing, I positioned myself across the street from a fancy restaurant Ethan had mentioned, partially hidden behind a parked car, my heart pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. After what felt like an eternity, I saw Ethan exit looking jumpy and pale. He was with a burly, impeccably dressed man in an expensive suit. This had to be Victor Vic Costello. He was about 50, with an imposing presence and eyes so cold they seemed to absorb the light around them. Costello clapped Ethan on the shoulder, a gesture that looked more like a veiled threat than a friendly reassurance. They slipped into a sleek black SUV that purred with expensive power. As the vehicle pulled away, my eyes caught a discreet logo on the rear passenger door, 3 stylized letters, SBS, enclosed in a circle. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers surprisingly steady, and managed to zoom in, snapping a quick picture of the license plate and the logo just before the SUV disappeared around a corner. I'm starting to suspect Ethan's debts aren't just from losing bets or foolish investments anymore, I thought, a chilling certainty settling in. This seems bigger, more organized. And SBS, Summit Business Services, as I would soon find out, is a name I won't forget. Armed with this sliver of information, I knew I couldn't proceed alone. My initial online searches for Summit Business Services yielded vague, almost sanitized results. Their official business listed as consulting with reviews that were either generically positive or suspiciously non-existent. It all felt very off. It was clear I needed professional guidance. In early 2024, I found myself in a bright modern coffee shop called Brew and Bites, a world away from the hurried atmosphere of the daily grind. Across from me sat Jessica Ramirez, a lawyer in her early 30s, whose sharp, intelligent gaze was softened by a genuinely compassionate demeanor. I laid out my entire story, from the stolen inheritance to my suspicions about Costello and SBS, my voice steady despite the churning emotions the recounting stirred up. I slid my phone across the table, showing her the photo of the SUV's logo. "And that's the logo SBS," I concluded. "I think this company is more than just a loan shark operation. Given the amount of money Ethan mentioned and how quickly he got into trouble again, I think it could be a front company for money laundering or something similar. My brother is just a pawn, a disposable one." Jessica listened intently, her expression thoughtful, her fingers tapping lightly on the table as she absorbed the details. She picked up my phone, examining the photo closely. "What you're describing is incredibly serious, Ava," she said, nodding slowly. "And you've shown immense courage in pursuing this, especially after what your family has put you through. Summit Business Services. I've heard whispers about them, nothing concrete, but enough to raise suspicion." She didn't make any empty promises, no guarantees of easy success, but she listened. She believed me. And in doing so, she gave me something I hadn't felt in months, a flicker of genuine hope. "To bring this to light," she continued, "to get justice for what happened to your inheritance and to potentially stop them, we need concrete evidence, more than just suspicion." A surge of determination, the same that had fueled my no to my mother, coursed through me. "I'll find it," I vowed, my jaw set. "I used to be a business major before, well before all this happened. I know how to look at financial statements, or at least how to spot red flags. I can be careful." Jessica offered a small, encouraging smile. "Okay, Ava, let's keep in close contact. Document everything. And please be careful. People like Costello don't play nice." The following months were a blur of relentless clandestine activity. By day, I was Ava the barista, serving lattes with a practiced smile. But by night, and in every spare moment, I transformed into Ava the investigator. Looking like any other student with a backpack, I discreetly observed the nondescript office building that housed Summit Business Services. I took photos from a distance, noting license plates of high-end cars in its private parking lot, documenting comings and goings. Back in my small studio, I'd hunch over my laptop, surrounded by printouts of public records, financial articles, and a steadily growing pile of instant noodle cups. I taught myself advanced online search techniques, learned about forensic accounting in my spare moments, and painstakingly cross-referenced business registrations, director lists, and property records. The Tech Connect Community Hub proposal, once a symbol of my bright future, now lay on a shelf, a bittersweet reminder of my past ambitions, its presence strangely fueling my current grim investigation. I spent hours in the public library, using their powerful computers to access databases. I couldn't afford slowly peeling back the layers of SBS's operations. I uncovered a complex labyrinthine web of shell companies linked to SBS, many with opaque business purposes, and a suspiciously frequent turnover in directorship. One evening, as rain lashed against my tiny apartment window, I was tracking a series of large, irregular financial transactions that seemed to flow through these shell companies. My eyes widened, my breath catching in my throat, as a familiar name leaped out from the screen. Miller's Home Solutions, my parents' modest business, was listed in several substantial transactions, with entities I now knew were directly linked to Summit Business Services. The amounts were staggering, far exceeding any plausible business dealings for a company of their size. The truth was even worse than I imagined. I whispered to the empty room, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. It wasn't just Ethan. My parents, they weren't just naive victims paying off their son's debts. Their business was also involved. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Were they coerced, willfully blind, or a thought too horrifying to initially contemplate? Were they actively participating? The possibility that they might have become complicit, perhaps unknowingly at first, then deliberately looking the other way, all to protect Ethan, their business, and perhaps, just perhaps out of a creeping greed, was a devastating burden to bear. My covert investigation, it seemed, hadn't gone entirely unnoticed. One particularly dark night, as I was walking home from my late shift at the coffee shop, a dark car, its engine almost silent, sidled up beside me. The window rolled down, revealing a shadowy figure, little more than a silhouette in the dim streetlight. "Curious girls can get hurt." A low, menacing voice rasped, each word a chilling threat. "Don't stick your nose where it doesn't belong." The car then sped off into the night, leaving me shaken, my heart hammering against my ribs. But as the initial shock subsided, the fear quickly transmuted into a cold, hard anger, a renewed and even fiercer determination. They were trying to scare me. It meant I was getting close. Many weeks later, looking tired but resolute, I sat opposite Jessica Ramirez in her law office once more. Between us, on the polished mahogany desk, lay a meticulously organized binder thick with documents, spreadsheets, transaction timelines, and damning photos. The culmination of months of tireless, nerve-wracking work. "It's all in there," I said, my voice quiet but firm. Transaction histories I managed to piece together from public records connections between SBS and dozens of shell companies, even some anonymous employee reviews I found on obscure forums hinting at illegal activities, and the transactions involving my parents' business. Jessica spent several minutes carefully reviewing the contents, her expression growing more serious, more impressed with each page she turned. Finally, she looked up, a new level of respect evident in her eyes. "Ava, this," she began, pausing as if to choose her words carefully, "is extraordinary. The detail, the connections you've made, what you've compiled here is substantial. This is more than enough to get the authorities involved. This goes far beyond a family dispute over an inheritance. This points to significant organized criminal activity." "So what now?" I asked, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. Jessica's gaze was steady. "Now we take this to people who can do something with it. Given the potential scale of the money laundering, I think we should approach the Economic Crimes Unit at the District Attorney's Office. They'll have the resources to investigate properly." She paused, her expression softening slightly. "It won't be easy, Ava, and it could get very messy for your family, especially with their business being implicated. Are you prepared for that?" I took a deep, steadying breath, the image of my parents' faces, my brother's downcast eyes flashing before me. But then, I remembered the cold dismissal of my dreams, the casual appropriation of my grandmother's legacy, the threats. "I'm ready," I said, my voice clear and unwavering. "They made their choices, I'm making mine." The wheels of justice, once set in motion with the evidence I'd painstakingly gathered, turned with surprising speed. Just a few days after Jessica presented my findings to the Economic Crimes Unit, several unmarked police cars and a van from the city's Economic Crime Unit pulled up outside the seemingly innocuous Summit Business Services office building. I wasn't there, but Jessica called me later to describe the scene. Plainclothes detectives' badges visible calmly and systematically entered the building, their presence sending ripples of shock and confusion among the employees inside. Later that day, a furious and clearly surprised Vic Costello was photographed being led out in handcuffs by two detectives. Several other men, presumably his key associates, were also escorted away. A local news crew tipped off by the unusual activity had arrived just in time to capture it, all their cameras rolling. Justice can be slow. I thought, a profound sense of relief washing over me mixed with a somber understanding of the coming storm for my own family. And sometimes it feels like it will never come. But it will if you're willing to fight for it, willing to drag the truth into the light no matter how painful. That evening, I found myself once again in the Miller family living room. The dim lighting did little to dispel the oppressive gloom that had settled over the house, a tangible weight of despair that was even heavier, more suffocating than before. My parents, David and Sarah, sat huddled together on the sofa, looking completely devastated, as if they had aged years in just a few short months. Ethan was ashen-faced, staring blankly at the floor, the picture of utter defeat. The news had broken their business. Miller's Home Solutions was officially implicated in the SBS investigation, its assets frozen, its future uncertain. The threat of criminal charges now hung heavy over my father. I entered the room and the silence was broken only by my mother's ragged breathing. I looked at them not with triumph, as some might expect, but with a deep, weary sadness that settled in my bones. "Are you happy now, Ava?" Mrs. Sarah whispered, her voice hoarse, laced with a potent mixture of bitterness and blame, as she finally looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed and accusing. "You've ruined us. You've ruined your own family." I met her gaze, my own steady and clear, without flinching. "I didn't ruin anyone, Mom," I said, my voice calm, despite the storm of accusations in her eyes. "Your choices, your constant enabling of Ethan, your willingness to look the other way when things clearly crossed the line, your decision to sacrifice my future to cover up his mistakes, and Ethan's irresponsibility, his repeated refusal to face the consequences of his actions. That's what led to this. I just did what was right. I brought the truth to light." My father's voice, when he finally spoke, cracked with an emotion I hadn't heard from him in years, a flicker of genuine remorse. Shame was etched deeply on his face. "We were wrong, Ava, so wrong," he choked out. "We always underestimated you, always put Ethan first. We thought we were protecting him, but—" His words trailed off, lost in the weight of his regret. "Money can be earned back, perhaps," I said, addressing them all, my voice even. "But trust once shattered and integrity once compromised are very hard to rebuild. I hope after all this, everyone will finally understand what truly matters: honesty, hard work, accountability, taking responsibility for your actions." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The gravity of my words hung in the air, an undeniable truth in the wreckage of their choices. I felt a profound sorrow for the family I once thought I had the idealized image, now irrevocably shattered. But alongside the sorrow, there was also a burgeoning sense of liberation, of a burden finally lifted. I had spoken my truth. "They may not fully understand yet," I told myself. "Earning their genuine respect, if that's even possible anymore, will take more time, more introspection on their part than I can force." But I knew in that moment they finally saw me, not as the overlooked daughter, the convenient sacrifice, but as the woman I had been forced to become. I turned and walked away, leaving them to the silence and the profound consequences of their decisions. A few months later, sunlight streamed into the Phoenix Bean, a cozy, bustling little cafe that was now my own. The decor was warm and inviting, with local artwork adorning the walls, creating a haven of community and creativity. This was my new venture, my hard-won dream. I stood behind the counter, a genuine, radiant smile on my face, as I handed a latte to a customer, moving with a newfound confidence that felt as natural as breathing. The cafe was funded by a small business loan specifically for young entrepreneurs, and, in a twist of irony that wasn't lost on me, a portion of the restitution awarded by the court from Costello's seized assets. A small legal acknowledgement of the inheritance money I had lost. A tasteful section of the cafe displayed flyers and information about local nonprofits and community initiatives. A quiet nod to my original dream of helping the community now realized in a different, perhaps more grounded form. Life isn't a fairy tale, I often thought, wiping down the counter during a quiet moment. The wreckage of the past doesn't just disappear. There are still legal proceedings involving my family-fractured relationships that may never fully heal. But through it all, I learned how to navigate the storm, how to rebuild my life from the ashes brick by painstaking brick on my own terms. Jessica Ramirez, who had become more than just a lawyer but a trusted friend, often visited. "This place is amazing, Ava," she'd say, beaming as she looked around the thriving space. "It's really you. I'm so proud of you." Her belief, her guidance had been instrumental. "Thanks, Jessica." I'd reply, my smile widening. "I couldn't have done it without you. It means the world." The Phoenix Bean quickly became more than just a coffee shop. It blossomed into a neighborhood fixture. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and baked goods was a constant welcoming presence. I, now 24, hired a small dedicated staff, which freed me up to manage the business and even host occasional community events. Poetry readings, acoustic music nights, and workshops for aspiring local entrepreneurs sharing the hard lessons I'd learned. One crisp autumn afternoon, as I was sketching out ideas for a new seasonal menu, the bell above the door chimed a familiar, welcoming sound. I looked up to see my father, David Miller, standing hesitantly by the entrance. Months had passed since I'd last seen him, mostly during strained brief encounters related to the ongoing legal processes involving their old family business. He looked older, more subdued than I remembered, but there was a softness in his eyes, a vulnerability I hadn't seen in years, perhaps ever. "Dad," I said, a note of surprise in my voice, but not unkindness. I gestured to an empty table near the window. "Come in." He sat looking around the bustling cafe with a quiet awe, taking in the vibrant art, the hum of conversation, the scent of coffee. "This place, it's really something, Ava. You've done well," he said, his voice low. "Thanks," I replied, joining him, a strange mix of old hurts and new possibilities swirling within me. An awkward silence thick with unspoken words settled between us before he finally spoke, his gaze fixed on his hands resting on the table. "Your mother, she still finds it hard. Very hard, but I wanted to say, I've had a lot of time to think about everything." He paused, then lifted his eyes to meet mine directly, and I saw the depth of his sorrow. "We were wrong, Ava, so profoundly wrong. We were so focused on Ethan, on what we thought was important, on appearances. We didn't see you. We didn't see your strength, your talent, your spirit." His voice caught. "I'm sorry for all of it. For the money, yes, absolutely. But more than that, for not believing in you, for not championing you." I listened, my expression unreadable at first, letting his words sink in. The apology so long in coming, so desperately needed by the younger Ava, hung in the air between us. It didn't magically erase the past, the pain, or the years of struggle, but it felt like a crack of light in a long, darkened room. It was a beginning. "Thank you for saying that, Dad," I said finally, my voice gentle but firm. "It means something. It means a lot." I knew forgiveness was a journey, not a single act, and this was perhaps the very first tentative step on a very long, uncertain road. There would be no easy reconciliation, no miraculous return to what was, because what was had been built on a flawed foundation. But maybe, just maybe, something new, something more honest and real could be painstakingly built from the ruins. Later that week, while closing up the cafe alone with my thoughts, I found myself looking at the old Tech Connect Community Hub proposal, which I kept in a drawer in my small office. I smiled faintly, a wistful but not entirely sad expression. The path had been so different, so much harder than the bright-eyed 21-year-old Ava could ever have imagined. But the Phoenix Bean, I realized, was its own kind of community hub, built not just with loans and restitution, but with resilience, integrity, and a dream forged in fire. In my spare time, I'd even started taking a few online coding classes, a quiet rekindling of an old passion now pursued solely for myself on my own terms, without the crushing weight of anyone else's expectations or the need to prove anything to anyone but myself. As I locked the door of my cafe and stepped out into the cool night air, I looked up at the vast expanse of stars twinkling in the clear sky. The journey had been about so much more than just reclaiming what was lost or exposing wrongdoing. It was about discovering who I truly was, the depths of my own strength, and what I was capable of when pushed to the absolute limit. I was a survivor, yes, but I was also a creator, a business owner, an investigator by necessity. I was Ava Miller, and I was finally, irrevocably, the architect of my own life. The future was still unwritten, a blank page stretching before me, but now I held the pen with a steady, confident hand, ready for whatever came next. I was once the undervalued one, the forgotten one, the one whose dreams were deemed secondary. Now I stand tall, defined not by my family's past failures, but by my own hard-won strength, my unwavering integrity, and my absolute refusal to be broken or silenced. Success, I've learned, isn't just a destination you arrive at. It's the arduous, often painful journey of affirming your own worth, of rising again and again, even when the world tries to keep you down. And my journey, it's truly, beautifully just beginning. Have you ever been underestimated, or had your future decided for you by others? How did you find the strength to reclaim your story and redefine your own path? Share your experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if this journey of resilience and self-discovery resonated with you. Remember, your worth is inherent, and sometimes the greatest power comes from proving not to others, but to yourself, just how strong you truly are. Thank you for joining me on this incredible, unexpected journey.